Hello Insta family, it is Dr. T here coming to you on Wednesday night. Hope you guys are all good. Okay, I'm going to get straight into it because I have a very short period of time today. I thought it was quite funny actually as I walked into the room where I'm doing my live because I've got to be open and honest with you. This is the chaos that I am currently living in with two young girls. I like to try and keep things nice and orderly, and my girls like to try very hard to keep things nice and clean and orderly for me. And sometimes it means just shoving things in cupboards and closing doors. So when I walked into our little, what we call our music room, which is part study, part music room, where I've set myself up, where nobody can hear any noise. This is what I actually walked into today, like about 5 minutes ago. I just have to show you guys. Look at it. It's an absolute, look behind me. I had to literally fight my way through the mess to find somewhere to sit down. But anyway, I'm here and I've kind of made it look like it's nice and orderly behind me, but it's an absolute mess. So I'm just going to walk out at the end and shut the door. Okay, so question has already come through to me on DM. Hey, Michelle. Good to see you, my friend. If you have a question tonight, please drop it into the comments section. Once again, we have our little guidelines. Please try and keep it as generic as you possibly can because I'm going to make the answers as generic so that it can apply to lots of different people. We don't want your whole life story. And please don't hesitate to ask questions because I can guarantee that what you ask, somebody else will be wanting to know the answer to anyway. So I had a question sent through to me on DM. Somebody had gone for an egg retrieval with approximately 20 odd follicles, seemed so quite hyperstimulated, and they had received a decapeptyl trigger. And they were wanting to understand the difference between the different types of triggers, why you would change to a decapeptyl trigger, and what does it mean for ovulation and how it might affect how many eggs you collect. So the traditional trigger that we use is something called HCG, the commercial name Ovidril, and HCG is the same as the pregnancy hormone beta HCG, but in this context, it is used to replicate the LH surge. And the LH surge is what actually matures the eggs within the follicles just prior to them ovulating. And what researchers have determined is that the average time from the trigger until when ovulation would occur is just on 36 hours. So that's why we plan to do our egg collection around the 36-hour mark after your trigger so that we are collecting eggs before they ovulate, but after they have had the opportunity to mature. If we were to collect earlier than that, then there's a fair chance we're going to collect immature eggs or M1s. And if we leave it much longer than that, there's a chance that we could go to egg collection and in fact, ovulation has already occurred and then there are very few eggs to collect. So, does that mean that every single female ovulates at that 36-hour mark? Well, obviously, the answer is no. It works on that distribution curve. So that's the average. There will be some that go a little bit earlier and there are some that go a little bit later. Can we tell who those people are? Generally, no. You may get a hint if somebody's LH is starting to rise when you are giving the trigger. Perhaps they've actually already started to have an LH surge themselves. But other than that, sometimes it's very difficult to tell. And there are situations where we have taken females to an egg collection and, oh my goodness, they've already ovulated. So what do we do then? Well, it seems very reasonable to individualize the trigger time, so the time from trigger and to egg collection, but that has to happen in a subsequent cycle. So in regards to this person who sent me this direct message, they were worried because they had been given the decapeptyl trigger. So what is a decapeptyl trigger? It's a GnRH agonist. So what that is, GnRH is a hormone that actually stimulates the pituitary to release FSH and LH. And so when you give the GnRH, it actually promotes a release of FSH and LH from the pituitary gland. So you're actually getting a physiological surge of the LH. So it might be in that individual that they have a different response time to their own LH being produced than they would do to the beta-HCG. And that's perhaps why they have gone a little earlier with the decapeptyl trigger. So the benefit to the decapeptyl trigger is that it's a short-acting molecule, so it rapidly decreases the corpus luteum, so reduces the chances of you getting OHSS, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, particularly if you've got a large number of follicles that have been collected. I guess the disadvantage then is that you have to do a freeze-all unless you're supporting the lining. So most of us do what we call segmentation. So we give a decapeptyl trigger, collect the mature eggs, fertilize them, create the embryos, freeze them, and look at doing a frozen embryo transfer. And it works exceptionally well, particularly in labs who have really, really good freeze-thaw programs. But it could be in any one situation that perhaps people physiologically respond differently. And so in this particular scenario, perhaps she did ovulate a little bit early, and if decapeptyl were to be used again in the future, it might be you look at a 34-hour window instead of a 36-hour window. So these are the things that we learn. What I always say to my patients is IVF can sometimes be as diagnostic as it is therapeutic. There are things that we learn about women and men as we are doing our IVF that will then help us to more individualized treatment in subsequent cycles. So I'm really hoping that was a helpful answer, and all of you guys out there who have had conversion from an Ovidrel trigger to a decapeptyl trigger, you now understand why. Now, are there any other questions that have been posted? I haven't seen any come through, but don't hesitate to drop any questions that you might have into the comments section, and I can see if I can address them while you guys are on. So I do have a little secret while we are waiting. I do have a little secret to share with you guys. In fact, it's not really a little secret, but I'm going to ask you guys to keep an eye out in my stories over the next week. I actually fly out to Spain next Tuesday. It sounds like the life of the rich and famous, but it's really not. So I actually fly out to Spain, and I've got the opportunity next Friday to meet a very special woman. Now, if you didn't know, if you were under a rock and didn't realize, it is International Women's Day next Friday, the 8th of March. And I have the opportunity to connect with an amazing woman, someone who has an incredible social media presence, who is super smart, who is incredibly eloquent, has a really great handle on reproductive health and REI, which is the field that I'm in. And we're just going to have a fireside chat because I'm going to a place that's going to be really cold. I'm hoping there'll be a fireside, and we're going to have a really good chat about all things women health. So keep an eye out next week. I don't quite know what the timing is going to be like because I'm going to have to figure out the time difference, but we will try and get online to you guys on International Women's Day next Friday. Santina's Treasures, what are your thoughts on DHEA for improving egg quality? Low AMH but high antral follicle count. Well, that's super interesting. So let me address the first part of the question. DHEA. So this is a hormone, an androgen. It's a kind of low potency androgen that is produced by the follicles in the ovaries, and is part of the soup in which the little egg sits in while follicular genesis is happening. So it's a really important hormone. Now, it is actually quite high in those women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Why? Because they've got lots of follicles that are in the process of developing, and therefore their DHEA levels are high across the board. But we also know that follicles that are poorer in quality probably don't produce as much DHEA. Is this something that I would measure and try to predict based on serum levels? Probably not. Would I consider DHEA supplementation in a female who has presumed poor egg quality? I probably would consider it. I would definitely consider it in the older poor responder, so someone who we expect to have low numbers. Why? Well, the levels of evidence around whether it actually changes outcomes that you're interested in, such as pregnancy rates, it's pretty poor. But it's a low potency androgen. It's very easy to get. It's not expensive. And it's something that you can take leading into the IVF cycle. And I would probably recommend taking it for around about 3 months, the time of follicular genesis, leading into an egg collection. So they're kind of my thoughts on DHEA. Do I think it's a game changer? No, but it certainly helps to add to that armamentarium of things that we can offer that might help to improve outcomes. But great question. Constantly, Steph. Hi, I have a little question. I have 2 focal nodular, I'm assuming, hyperplasia on my liver. I have been told I cannot do IVF. Is this correct? I don't have any more info at this stage. Should I investigate? Well, if you have had a biopsy that shows focal nodular hyperplasia, or if you've had imaging suggestive of this, I would absolutely discuss with your gastroenterologist or hepatologist. These things do tend to be responsive to hormones, estrogen and progesterone, but particularly estrogen. I would certainly be having a discussion with your hepatologist. But if you're having normal cycles, then it's being exposed to hormones anyway. And if it's not growing, if it's quite stable, then I can't see there to be any significant risk. But again, as a fertility specialist, if you came to me with that, I would certainly be liaising with your hepatologist, discussing it, looking at serial imaging. But if you can't do IVF, then you probably can't fall pregnant, right? Because the hormones that you produce in pregnancy are a damn sight higher than what you get exposed to during a 2-week IVF cycle. So I don't think that IVF is contraindicated. That's my position, but of course I don't know your full history. So hopefully that's helpful to go back and kind of extend on that discussion point with your fertility specialist. Are there any other questions? My pleasure. Santina's treasures, easy peasy. Constantly, Steph, that is my pleasure. Well, there's some really interesting questions today, guys. I really had to sort of stop and think about those before answering them. Is there anything else before I chuff off to do the mummy duties and maybe think about cleaning this room? Well, I think that is my key, my little trigger to move on. Let me just check and see that I don't have any further questions. Nothing further. Well, hopefully that was helpful for all of you. As I said, keep an eye out for next week. I've got a couple of little videos coming to you over the next 2 weeks about some common questions that I am asked as well in the fertility space. And hopefully next week I'll be able to reveal to you who my very special guest on International Women's Day is. Have a beautiful night. See you soon.